all in real-world units that make sense. The editing tools for editing the timeline in Matinee work reasonably well, but they're not particularly intuitive to a traditional nonlinear editor. So if you worked on an Avid or a Premiere, it presents you with a lot of data. It's very complicated. We wanted to condense that into something smaller and more compact. On top of that, as the quality gets higher, people start to think about color space, mastering, dynamic range, EXRs, and we wanted to make sure the tool could support professional output capabilities. And then the biggest thing for us is that the way Matinee works, it really was built for one artist at a time to work with a scene. And as anybody knows, when you're doing production, time starts to run out, you need to put more people on it. You need different people for lighting versus doing the layout versus the animation versus even adjusting the post-processing and the sort of digital intermediate that we would do in a movie. So Matinee had a restriction that was usually one user at a time. Sequencer is built for every different thing that you would normally do when you're building a sequence. You can do that with a different person, and it's all very sort of atomic on the file, the way it stores its files, so you can really move in parallel very, very quickly. Okay, so Sequencer, the actual underlying architecture, has been in Unreal Engine 4 for quite a while, but the core user experience and how we would interact with the system was undecided. We put together a new team, the best of our tools team, amazing people, my friend Mike, Matt, and James, classic epic engineers, along with a new entry to the engineering team, Max Chen, who was a good friend of mine at Lucasfilm. He built the amazing pre-visualization system they use for the Clone Wars and all their TV shows at Lucasfilm, called ZViz. Michael Gay, he was my previous supervisor for the Matrix sequels, and had more recently been working in live broadcast as the chief technologist for ESPN. And then we have an amazing cinematics teams, both movie and games people combined together. We spent months in a room arguing with each other about workflows in the traditional movie business, the television business, and thrashed out, how would we get this thing to work? Because you've got to remember, Unreal Engine is a game engine. It still has to work for games companies. Whenever you trigger an event inside a game, you're going to be using Sequencer for that. So it's not just a cool little cinematics tool. It is the underlying animation system and animation triggering system for the engine. So that's where the challenge is. How do we make something that looks nice and easy to understand for traditional, movie artists, but also is going to work well for game companies? Okay. All right. So why make this change for Paragon? Well, Paragon's our new game. It's actually out in early access. You can, if you want to play it, you can get a founder's pack and play it. Although I think we're going to have a few free weekends in the near future, allow you to experience it. It's very character-driven. The idea of the game is it's a MOBA, and the gameplay focuses around these heroes. But instead of being a sort of isometric or a top-down view, it's very much, it plants you in the middle of the action. So you get animation and character quality at a level that we've never seen in one of these types of games before. We wanted something very special to announce it to the world. It was a secret until the beginning of December when we released this trailer. The game, we made the game pretty quickly. There was a lot of time spent in iterating on gameplay, but we had to go from sort of good working prototype into final polished visuals within a short amount of time. So what I felt would drive the visual development the best is by doing a cinematic so that we set the aspiration of what this thing can be. And also, we're epic. Every time we do a cinematic, we have to use our engine. We have to use the assets from our games. So it was a forcing function to make sure that the game looked amazing, and we were forced to deliver the same level of experience, not just on a high-end PC, but on a PlayStation 4. And it was fantastic to do that. Sequencer, we aim to release it or announce it at GDC this year, and we needed something to really test it with. We had so little time to make this trailer. It actually was made in about 12 weeks from concept to ending, and if we hadn't been using Sequencer, we would have had issues to do with that shot management workflow. We wouldn't have been able to have as many people work on it as we did, and in fact, all the artwork in the game, whether it be the environment, the characters, or the effects, the people working on the cinematic were the games team. They were making these assets for the game. So it was a lot of people all working in parallel to put this thing together, and we needed them capabilities of Sequencer. And at the time, the nonlinear editing capabilities, the Premiere/Avid type functionality, that wasn't online. But we felt it was worth testing the underlying architecture at this early stage. Okay, I'll quickly show you the announced trailer. This is 100% Unreal Engine, and it was created in less than 3 months. It was a collaboration between us and our good friend at Victory Pictures, Mike Chalice, who sort of co-directed with our animation director, Gavin Moran. Thank you. One of the nice things as well is we knew when we burned this thing out as video, we wanted super high quality. So we worked with our graphics team to improve the quality of depth of field and motion blur to make sure it really looked almost like it had been rendered in a software renderer. Obviously, we have 33 milliseconds, or actually in Paragon's case, when you play the game, it's having to calculate in about 60 milliseconds a frame. So there's definitely challenges in that, but it was fun. It's a testimony to how far real-time computer graphics have come. Okay, so the path to finals. So we had a hybrid approach, two ways of making shots. More traditional setup here was storyboards for a few of the shots. Go into good old Maya, take the layout that we'd laid out in the engine, bring it in, and then place either keyframed animation or motion captured characters into the scene. Bring it back into the engine, light things with the, these are the sort of the rough proxy assets, and then you can see here's the final where it's dressed. We've tweaked everything, got the materials on stuff, and lit it. And remember, all that lighting, for anybody who does lighting professionally, it's all interactive. It's not a progressive, refine. It literally is. You move a light, you get instant updates. Okay. The majority of our shots, so these slightly crude-looking things are the very early version of our replay system. So what we would do because we wanted to make sure moments in the game, in the trailer, were very authentic to the game. So the original plan had been, we'll use the replay system, play the game. So the cinematic artist would go in, play the game, and the way that Paragon works, and actually you can do this for any Unreal game that you make, you can make it record the network streams of everything that happens in the game, and then bring that into a cinematic tool and place cameras and film the events. So our original bold idea was to use the replay system. Now, unfortunately, the animation systems, the animation sets didn't really fully come online at the time, but a bunch of stuff did actually make it through, and this is where we were at the beginning, and as you saw earlier, that was the final quality. Now, as we were assembling the trailer, obviously shot framing. We had an environment team populating the 1 kilometer space that is the Agora level for Paragon, but they wasn't finished. And what we would have to do is, as we started to work out which areas, we had this weird iterative loop where we'd go, okay, environment team, what bits of the world are going to be good? Well, we'll have finished this area near the gate, and maybe a little bit of the jungle's done, and maybe this is going to be done. So we would choose areas that would allow you to allow us to see stuff that was more complete. And then as we got a little bit further on in the cinematic, we're like, this doesn't look good enough, environment team, can you actually move on to working on this area? So we had a nice balance of pushing things forward, both for the game and the cinematic. Okay, so what we're going to show here is a quick comparison of how it looked. It's the first version of every shot. On the top left, this is what the shots looked originally like when we conceived them. And in the bottom right is the final. And you'll notice that some major changes happened to the world of Agora. We did a total rethink. We're making a game. It's not like a movie. It has to be playable. So we had some issues to do with the space and the way that characters would interact. We're trying to make a competitive game. We have to make sure it's tuned for competitiveness. So we changed a bunch of stuff. We also had issues to do with some bits of the environment we just didn't like, and we replaced. As you can see, some characters were done at the beginning. Some characters weren't. Some had mocap, some had keyframe. It was really a hodgepodge, and constantly updating shots as we went along. It's real time, so as soon as you get an update, everybody sees it. It's quite satisfying. Although we don't have quite the finesse in lighting that you would have in something like Arnold. I see Marcus out there. The fact that we can iterate incredibly quickly, and the fact that we've got this sort of multi-user system, is quite fun to produce something. As you can see, we even swapped out characters as well. Some of them we decided, oh, they're not going to be ready, and then we just had to choose another character. This asteroid idea was, that we knew that that character was going to throw asteroids as a weapon, but we hadn't really totally decided it, so we decided it for the gameplay team by putting something in the cinematic before it actually worked in the game. All right, I think you've seen enough of that, because I think you want to see an actual practical demo of Sequencer in a while. So I'm going to turn it over to HP. HP joined us as a consultant. He's a good friend of mine, one of the pioneers in image-based lighting, but helps us on lighting and look development on this project. So I'm going to pass you the clicker and not forget.
Thanks very much, Kim. So I'll talk just quickly about some of the work that we've done for the Paragon trailer around look dev, lighting, and shading. Going into the trailer, we knew that we had a great physically based shading system that was really driving the look of the Epic games and all the Unreal games. But we also looked at the character work and decided to focus on a couple key components, adding new shading models for cloth, hair, and eyes, and also updating the subsurface scattering. You can see the image on the right is a shot of a real woman whose hair has been groomed to match our character's hair. On the left, you have a render of the character, and in that render of their hair, you can see sort of initial reflection, that has been transmitted through the hair once, and also direct transmission. So there's a number of effects that are modeled in the game system's hair shading model that are directly representative of the way real hair reflects and transmits light. The new eye model that we put in has support for, again, a number of effects that are there in a real eye. So we have refraction of the iris, we have caustics, we have subsurface scattering of the sclera, or the whites of the eye. We have the limbus, which is sort of the dark circle that separates the iris from the sclera. We have a softening around the edge transition between the eyelid and the eyeball, and a number of other effects that are now just available for anyone using Unreal. We also added a new shading model for cloth. The defining characteristic for a cloth shading model is a grazing angle, specular reflection that you can see, especially on the right image over her shoulder. And that was those three components were key in defining the look of the characters. The other before I move on, the interesting bit with those additions to the shading models for the trailer is that those shading models are also used directly in-game. So when you play Paragon on a PS4, you are seeing the exact same shading techniques, the exact same materials as you see in the trailer. So for LookDev, we started with building on using those new shading models. We grabbed scan data, typically from Otoy for our human characters, and then added lots of artistic enhancement. We built a library of base materials, so leather, cloth, metal, which we could then blend between and use for new characters. And we looked at our characters in a single turntable environment. In this case, one that was set in the Epic Courtyard. If you've been to Cary, if you've been to the office in North Carolina, you'll be able to recognize the background on the next slide. For the environments, we combined organic detail that was generated by scanning rocks and processing those in Agisoft with high poly modeled architectural elements. So this is an example of a subset of the characters that are in the trailer and an even smaller subset of the characters that are in the game, lit in that image-based lighting environment set again in the Epic Courtyard. So if you ever wanted to go to North Carolina, here's a little taste of what that looks like. It's sunny there sometimes. These are two examples of the environments rendered or the environments from the Paragon trailer. So again, we have a combination of organic detail that was generally started as scan data combined with high poly model data. For the lighting, we had a couple of challenges. One, we had a pretty big environment that actually started with, where we had baked global illumination and direct lighting from the playable level to start with. But then we also had characters and specific shots that had very specifically chosen camera angles and motion that was really meant to highlight certain aspects of the game or the gameplay or the action. So we would go through and starting with that base level lighting, then layer on additional lighting to emphasize the elements that were important to the shot. One of the things that was great that was added right around the time of the trailer was light channels, or for a more general usage, light linking. So we could actually place lights and attach those and have those drive only the lighting on the character or only the lighting on the environment to emphasize certain elements or certain pieces of the shot. In the case of these two images, we have on the left a character who is in the middle of explosions. It's just a general melee, and so we want to make sure that we had lighting coming from all directions, reflecting the explosions and other elements. In the case of the image on the right, we were really there to focus purely on the character's heroism and his strength, and so the lighting was chosen to emphasize that. In these sort of intro shots for the characters, our goal there is to make them look as sort of amazing as possible, to either show off their strength with the guy on the right, their beauty with the girl, and perhaps the guy in the front, depending on how you go, and sort of their general stature with the two guys on the left. One of the techniques that we used in almost all the shots was actually going for a more sort of visual effects or movie-style lighting, in that we were trying to emulate, or at least attempting to emulate, area lights. So we would place banks of lights around the characters. In this example, we have two stills from one shot on the left, as well as sort of pulled-out camera views of that same shot on the bottom left and right. So you can see that we have rows of lights sort of going down the path that the character is running. That allowed us to get a sort of nice soft sky lighting on the character, as well as to emphasize her silhouette so that she would really pop out against the background of the shot. Same thing is true for the next frame. You can see in the top left is the frame from the shot. On the right and bottom left and right are pulled out views where you can see the lights that were actually used to light the shot. One of the great things about doing this trailer and doing it in engine is that, as Kim mentioned earlier, every change we made to those lights we could see instantaneously. So crafting the lighting, crafting the look of the shot really was a very interactive experience, which is often not the case for offline rendering. So that was a nice switch for someone with a background in a more traditional rendering experience. So just a little touch on what we did on the lighting, look dev, and shading side. Let me bring up Michael Gay, and he can tell you a little bit more about Sequencer.
Thanks, HP. Just going to bring up the engine here, and I'm going to give you a little taste of Sequencer. And as as we've discussed, we used a trailer to kind of drive the development, to fast-track the development of sequencers. Sorry about this. Let me. Oh, all right, there we go. All right, so we're going to take a look here. This is the first thing you're going to notice is that this is a brand new interface for the engine. Over here on this side, you have it's laid out kind of like a traditional nonlinear editing system, and that's not a mistake. The reason we did that is we're trying to make a tool that's very familiar to people who've used these types of tools before, and we want an experience where people can get into the engine and almost know exactly how it works. And as you might be able to guess, you slide the scrub bar around here, just like you would in any traditional nonlinear editing system. So if we go, just play it, stop on a frame, we can move shots around, and that's a really powerful tool. As Kim mentioned, adopting a shot-based workflow let us, for the first time ever in the engine, have multiple artists working on multiple shots at the same time. And this really helps elevate both the quality and the quantity of stuff you can output. And as we're about to see here, with Sequencer, we now have the ability to edit the entire cut with the same speed. So let's play through this shot here for a second. So as we play through, we see our heroes running down the hill here. There's this big kind of grandiose moment there. Maybe it's a little over the top. And then we come down here and I look at our buddy Grux. So let's say we're looking at this in dailies, and we've all submitted our changes, and we look at this shot and we're like, you know what? I don't know if that shot works. It kind of slows the moment down. Let's see what it looks like without it. So we can simply slide this stuff over. And now when we look at it, watch the same cut. All right, here's running down the hill, and then we're instantly going into the shot, which kind of doesn't make sense because we're going from Twin Blast and his normal guns here to Twin Blast and his super guns there. So you know what? Let's go ahead and put that back. And while this looks very simple, historically this has been very difficult to do, to play around editorially within the engine. And almost to the point where people are almost discouraged from doing it. And as we know, like making changes and iterating is the key to success, as we probably see as anyone who's created anything knows. So, that's a very important element of what we're doing. We're, again, making it fast, easy to create great-looking cinematics. So let's talk about cameras. It's something new we put in the engine is the idea of actual proper camera settings. And so let's take a second here and talk about those and why cameras are important and why proper settings are important. So now we have the concept of film backs in the engine. And a film back, you might not know what a film back is, but it's a very important part of camera. It's basically the imager. The imager is what gives the camera its field of view. And so it's the imager size combined with the focal length of your lens that provides the angle of view that you're using. So in this case, we've included several film backs. We also have the ability for you to add your own. So for instance, right now we're on this 16:9 film. We can go to Super 35. We can go up to IMAX. And so you see we're getting a much wider field of view, and that's because the size of an IMAX frame is much bigger than it is on, say, Super 35. We've also included other more common things you might be familiar with, the DSLR. And so, we're trying to do this so that people can come into the engine and know exactly what they're going to see if they put in Super 35 with a 50mm lens. And if you have that image in your head, the image is going to translate directly to the screen. So we're pretty excited about that. We've been playing around with a lot of things to make this accurate. So we're going to click back on that. And likewise, we're including a bunch of different lenses. These are common lenses. You can also customize this per project, right? So if you're shooting a project and you only have a very limited lens kit, then you want to put those in so you make sure anything you shoot will match the rest of your piece. So, the key reason why we put these new features in is one, so you can get what you expect, but also so it behaves exactly like you'd expect in terms of camera effects, whether it's depth of field, grain, all these types of things. Because we want, in order to create realistic cinematics, you want realistic, exposure and all this type of stuff. So right now we're just going to play with focus a little bit. As you can see, we're just adjusting the depth of field. Maybe we can focus on Twin Blast here, and then go back to our buddy Grux. And in the engine, historically, you have to kind of do this by hand. There's no easy way to kind of select what you want to focus on. So we've added this new tool, this little eyedropper tool. So now you can click what you want to focus on, similar to like your iPhone or your phone where you click on something. So in this case, we'll focus on steel here. And in addition to manually kind of setting the focus, we also have the ability to track the focus to an object. But not only that, we give you the ability to kind of offset that, because if you're really shooting something, your focus isn't always going to be on point, right? So you kind of delay it, kind of gives it a slightly more operated effect, which gives it a little bit more life. So for now, we'll just keep on manual. And one last thing for debugging focus, a lot of times you might want to see exactly where that focal plane is. So this kind of visualization tool helps you make sure it's exactly where you want it, if you want it on the tip of the barrel, or if you want to go all the way back to Grux. So again, we're trying to make quick tools so you can quickly set focus, do things like that. And back to the realistic camera behavior. Right now, we're just going to adjust the f-stop here. And as you can see, everything reacts exactly how you'd expect it. Come down here, adjust your aperture, maybe bring that back down, open it up to 1.2, get a super blurry effect. And let's go back to 1.4. So this is kind of auto-keyed what we were playing with, so we're just going to kill that. Another thing, your camera can look great all at once, but it's got to move correctly. And a lot of times, a camera is almost an actor in itself when you're creating a cinematic. So you want to make that look as realistic as possible, because if your background looks great, but your camera moves like perfectly rock solid, as sometimes cameras that are created in a computer are, it kind of destroys the effect. So one thing we've added is a way to quickly layer animation on top of your camera. And this could be anything from a little bit of handheld camera shake, maybe a running shake, but to like bombs going off and causing camera shake. So we're just going to quickly add a camera thing here. Let's give a noise that works pretty well. So we're just going to drop this in, and you can see as we're moving this around, it's going to give us just a little bit of motion, so it's not perfect. And of course, we just did this very quickly. You want to refine this and make sure it was working exactly as you'd want. And of course, you can come in here, scale it up, scale it down, and again, you can stack these too. So you can have another one that is for an explosion that's happening off screen. So it's these types of tools that we're trying to make it, again, easy to create cool-looking cinematics quickly. All right, so we've made that change to the shot. We're going to back out of here now and look at the full edit. So it helps a little bit, gives it a little more of a life to it. Along the lines of creating realistic camera motion, one thing we're doing is we're supplying a few camera rigs. So when the camera moves, it's kind of moving realistically. So if we're going to dive into this shot and check out this camera. So now we're actually moving around in the world. We're going to go into this mode, and you can see this camera is actually on a rail system. So we've included a couple different rigs, and we're looking to expand that. And the reason we did this is to make it kind of easy to drop cameras in, and just see how different rigs would work, or how using a different rig might give your shot a different feel. So we have rails, a crane camera, and things like that. So if we just come in here, this could just as easily be a spline. Right now, we're just set up to have this be a rail. And we'll kind of move this, maybe adjust this over here. So now, at the end of the shot, we're going to be a little bit closer to Grux for his final swing here. And boom. All right. So now we've made that change, we'll kind of back out of this. And we'll get out of game mode here. And take a look at that shot. And again, the cool part is seeing this pretty much instantly and seeing if that helps the shot. It's kind of cool. We start close on Grux and then we end close on Grux. I mean, it's just a quick montage, but it gives you an idea of how quickly you can iterate on this stuff. So that's adding camera shake and a few different attributes to your shot. A lot of times it's difficult to add players to a shot, or actors rather, especially if you're on this uneven topology like we're seeing here. A lot of time can be spent planning feed and things of that nature. So that's one thing, especially working on the Paragon trailer, that we kind of had to fight with, because it was on all this uneven terrain. And as Kim said, we used the replay system to kind of black out some of those shots. This is kind of the next evolution of that. So we're going to do something pretty cool here. We're going to go into the shot, and take a look. This is, so we have two foreground characters. We have Grux in the background. Maybe we add somebody in the background to have Grux run with, so they're going to attack in kind of waves, right? So in order to do that, we're just going to actually start playing the game in Editor. And this is a full Paragon game. This isn't a limited version of it, which in a second you'll see is pretty cool. We have, since all the characters have their own move tree designed to work in the game, we're gonna record that animation and get all those blends and all that stuff for free, and then we'll play it in our sequence. And then once it's in there, we'll be able to move stuff around and really get a sense of some of the stuff we can do. So we're just gonna join a team here. We're gonna pick Kalari, very cool character, and then we're just gonna start the game. All right, so we're in the game here. This is the same map we're using to do our cinematic. So we're just going to drive down, or run down actually, to where the cinematic is taking place. And once we get there, you can see the other, it's going to pop out of edit here. And so you can see our characters are down here. And we can, in fact, we can scrub through them and watch that play out. This is really cool because now you can start to stack these animations, right? And you can use the characters that are there for blocking. So what we're going to do, we're going to add a new track here. We're going to record a new sequence from current player. It figures out who we are, sets that up for us. And now you notice we have a little record icon here. So we're just going to back up and hit the record button. 3, 2, 1, and now we are recording. And you'll see that shot is just playing on repeat. And the reason it's doing that kind of looks like a glitch in the matrix. The reason it's doing that is because we're just recycling this shot so we know where to put the character. And you imagine if this was a much longer shot, you'd be able to run in and out of the character, or in and out of the sequence. So we're just going to pop out here. I think should be enough for that one shot that we need it for. All right, so now, and again, it's kind of cool here because you're still in the game. You can still come back around here and see how that shot looks from a different angle. Maybe you want to just scope out a few cameras from there. But in this case, we're just going to see how we do placing her. Whoa, and we're going to spaz out there. All right, all right. So now we have a new character you see in the upper left-hand corner here. And because she is her own kind of timeline, we're just able to slide her around. And we're just going to slide her maybe right there, so she's trailing Grux a little bit. All right, so now we've kind of laid out this shot. And in no time flat, we've added a whole character who's running on uneven terrain. And again, that was recording everything that she was doing. It's recording her effects, her animation, any sounds that are going on. And if we want to go in there and modify that, come in here, and you can see all this. It lays out all of the stuff. So you can come in here, tweak this, add a different effect, maybe add a different sound. But the really cool part is now that we've laid this out in the game, you can export this to whatever your favorite animation package is, and that can be at least the start of your final animation. So it's really a real time saver in both blocking out shots, maybe doing a previs for your game cinematic, or doing previs for a show you're working on. So it's again, things like this, we're just trying to make it faster and easier to do. One last thing I want to show is one of the really strong features of Sequencer. So we've created the shot, right? And maybe we were looking at this in dailies again, and we're like, you know what? There would never be these 4 characters in this lane during the game, so we're gonna have to lose one of them. And we're like, yeah, but we spent all this time putting it in. Historically, you'd have to go in, extract everything, and hopefully you got everything out when you're moving around. But in this case, and again, since we're adopting a lot of the same terminology as kind of film and video production, we're doing the same thing here. So we're just going to do a new take of the shot, and it does all the kind of back-end directory structure stuff for you. So now we have a new take of the shot, which has all 4 characters in it. And we play that, and now we can go into the shot, and we'll remove Kalari there. So we're just going to take her out, and now back out to the edit here. And so see it without. And let's say we're in dailies and want to check something real quick. It's as simple as just right-clicking here and going back to take 3. And so this can be done with anything. In this case, we're just using a character. This can be a new sound, a new facial animation, a new effect, basically anything. And the cool part about how some of the stuff is laid out in sequencer, is there are some elements in your scene that only exist in the shot. They don't need to exist in your level. So it makes for very transportable scenes that allow you to create very small and portable cinematics. So I hope that gives you kind of a taste of the types of things that we're working on and how we're envisioning this stuff working in the future. So with that, I'm going to show you some kind of the new stuff that we're working on. So we're just going to pause this. I'm going to go into real-time mode here, close this, and back to the presentation. All right. So that's me. And so this is a replay example. You guys pop back to keynote mode. All right. Earlier, Kim mentioned we use a replay system to spec out some of the shots for the trailer. And in the same way the sequencer and the game evolved, the replay system really evolved. So to the point now where we're putting out these pretty cool sequences on a weekly basis. And the cool part is, this is the same replay engine that comes with Paragon. So you can start creating your own Paragon cinematics within the engine and within the Paragon game. And if you look online, people are already starting to do this. It's almost like this contest to see who can make the coolest looking cinematics. So it's really, really starting to push the boundaries of user-generated content and high-quality user-generated content. And with some of the camera improvements that we've made as a result of building Sequencer, that's going directly into the replay system. So we're going to take a look here at one we just not too long ago released, and this is introducing one of the new characters. So take a look. So again, all that captured in the replay system, and we're looking forward to seeing what people are going to make with the new Paragon. Here to talk about some of the new upcoming features is Kim again.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, so just one thing about what we just saw, that replay system that's not going into sequencer. That's basically a consumer-facing part of the game that you can use. If you're making your own game, everything that we do, for the most part, features that we use in Paragon go into the main line of the engine and are available for you and your games. On top of that, that whole idea that you can play your game and then that stuff goes straight into sequencer, if you're a professional cinematics person, that is also available to you. You could be in a vanilla UE4 scene, run around our default UE4 guy, and be able to record and make a cinematic that way. So it's not just a powerful tool for us, it's a powerful tool for all of you, or anybody who wants to use UE4. Okay, so what's next? It's still pretty early days for Sequencer. I think we're considering where we are close to like a V1 version of Sequencer. Stuff that we're going to get in the near future, or at least before next GDC. We're going to have slates and overlays, so it makes it easier to pass on media to traditional editing pipelines. And on top of that, we'll have EDL import and export, so that if your editor isn't wanting to use a game engine, then you can still get your stuff out. On top of that, we're going to start considering how we want to integrate tools for live broadcasting. There's already an awesome company, NCAM, that have been playing with using the engine for live chroma keying and on-set virtual production stuff. We're going to make sure that there's a bunch of them capabilities built into the engine. We're also considering, and probably will do this, a very simple keyframing animation system. It's not going to be as sophisticated as a pro animation system, but enough for you to tweak poses, do blocking animation. If you don't have a character that was built as a player character, as long as you've got a UE4 compatible animation rig, you should be able to do simple posing and blocking. We have a new particle system on the way. Hopefully we're ready for next year, this time, we should have it to show, Niagara, that'll start introducing more movie-like effects capabilities with more of a data flow-driven, sort of node graph-based effect system. doesn't sound that exciting, but for anybody that's doing sort of hybrid productions with a little bit of live action, it's always nice to bring in a card with alpha channel and little movie sequences into the actual sequencer capabilities. And then the other thing that we're hoping is that we start collaborating with a few third-party companies to make plugins for Sequencer. We'll take it to a certain level, but there may be stuff like, hey, we would love a script ingest capability that auto-populates the timeline with pre-made shots. I don't think we'll end up doing that, but if anybody out there is interested in doing it, we're happy to support, through our plugin initiative, getting them things built. I think we're done.
Okay,
Want to
so
come back up?
we can take questions.
You're mic'd up, yeah.
Hi. You were talking about EXR support in Unreal. Would that also include like being able to export multipass EXR so you could take it into combusting, for example?
So right now, the way that the EXR stuff will be implemented, and we have early access version of it available on GitHub right now, is whatever's in the G buffers, you'll be able to specify the G buffers are sort of the accumulation of all the rendering passes that the engine has to do to be able to do its final pixels. Normals, depth, the normals, the depth buffer, the albedo, the final lighting, and with and without post-processing. They'll be exportable as separate things. It's not quite the same as I want this light to be exported by itself. To do that, what you would have to do is have a blueprint or something, basically, switch on and off that light and force Sequencer to go through an output sequence. But that's possible. People have even been doing that with Matinee, but it should be a little bit easier to do. On top of that EXR output, we're going to be ACES compatible, thanks to HP here. We'll also do standard sRGB, EXRs, old school visual effects style as well. But it should be pretty straightforward. But if you want to do really complicated AOVs, as we used to call them in the movie business, then you probably have to do something a little bit fancier to toggle visibilities and toggle lights on and off.
At the moment, you can save out multiple different files, so it's not one EXR with layers; it's multiple different passes. But yeah, so that's on the roadmap to just be combined.
And if somebody ends up picking up the source code and making the multi-buffer EXR work the way it would do traditionally in visual effects, you can always submit it back to us and we'll put it into the engine. But we'll do it eventually.
Thank you so much for a fantastic talk. I was wondering, like you're doing with Unreal, or the Unreal Tournament, you are releasing the levels so developers can go in and check it out. Do you have any plans for doing that for Paragon?
In terms of sort of modding Paragon stuff, we haven't really thought about it too much yet. I know Tim Sweeney's whole career has been about having a community be able to mod things. It's one of the reasons we built the replay tool, that the communities can express themselves in ways that they wouldn't be able to in other games. We'll see. We want to get the game nice and stable and working and balanced and make sure that the core fans of MOBAs love it. But yeah, we may do that. It's not ultimately my decision anyway. But Tim's always made mods for his game, so who knows?
Any other questions? Last chance, as someone who doesn't have that much to do with games myself, I'm looking at all of this stuff that's going on and thinking games are going to have a lot to do with me. So thank you, and please give a round of applause.
Thank you.